Hey guys, Coach Chris here, back with another video. Played in an over-the-board tournament this weekend. Overall, the tournament was a bit of a disaster, but we will get to that in rounds 2 and 3. So, this is the round 1 game. Time control was game in 25 with a 5-second delay. I opened with d4. Opponent responded knight f6. c4, controlling the center, g6, and we get into a King's Indian defense where white prioritizes central control, black prioritizes king safety and development. I just developed my knights to the most natural squares, put my pawns in the center. Standard chess so far. Bishop e2 doesn't look like a very active square for the bishop, but that's its best home right now. On d3, it would block the queen's protection of d4, which the d4 square, since the pawns are on c4 and e4, cannot be protected by another pawn, and so black often attacks the white center through the d4 square. So bishop e2 to prevent to allow the queen to protect d4 as well. This is the first sort of weird move of the game, b6. Typically in the King's Indian, black does not fianchetto both bishops. Typically it's just a dark squared bishop. And then, like I said, black's typical play is either e5 or c5. But by fianchettoing both bishops, black basically guarantees that one of the bishops, and more likely both of them, is going to be really bad. Because, for a reason we'll see, in the King's Indian, the center often closes up. White grabs more space whenever black advances. And then once that center closes up, those fianchettoed bishops are going to have to work pretty hard to find an active, useful role in the game. So I castled bishop b7, queen c2, just developing, protecting the e-pawn, knight bd7, and here I played rook b1, which may look a little weird, a little mysterious. So it's kind of a process of elimination move. Engine likes bishop g5. I didn't really want it to be kicked around by h6. I didn't intend to trade on f6. Wasn't quite sure where the bishop belonged. Bishop e3, I thought knight g4, and then I've got to move the bishop again. And so I played rook b1. The idea is to expand on the queen side, get the rook off of the long diagonal. So I was envisioning scenarios where black plays c5, I play d5, which would close down the light squared bishop, but open up the dark squared bishop. And I wanted the rook to be off that file, so there are no knight discovery tactics on the rook. So I played rook b1. And again, with the idea of expanding on the queen side, unless something else comes up, I played b3. And while it would certainly look more natural to play a3, b4, there's actually a problem with that move order. So if a3, black can actually clamp down on the queen side with this very typical a4 move. White can't just capture right away because black takes that big center pawn. And so in order to avoid that clamp and to slowly prepare the queenside expansion, I first played b3. Now there's a3. Let's just make a pass move, for example. So let's just make some dumb moves so we can illustrate the idea. Now we can play a3 and b4, and we are able to get in b4 without allowing black to clamp down on the queen side. So b3, opponent plays c5, and I played d5. So now this light squared bishop is just awful. Got more space in the center and on the queen side, so black really needs to do something here. My plan is to trade off black's good dark squared bishop and to eventually engineer an e5 break. Black kind of helps me with that idea. With knight g4, the intent is to swing the knight into e5, but I'm okay with that. I'm trying to play for an e5 break. I've got the center and the queen side under control. If I can have the king side, then the win should be pretty easy. And so I'm already envisioning when the knight comes to e5, I play knight takes e5, and then f4 will kick a piece out of there and further control e5. So I liked seeing knight g4 from black. I played bishop e2. Again, the idea is to control e5, trade off this dark squared bishop. Engine points out that knight g5 is just a great move here already, which is pretty interesting. So if black follows through on the plan, then f4, and knight's actually out of squares. So knight g5 didn't cross my mind. I stuck to the plan. I should have at least seen, though, that this knight is unprotected. I should have at least explored the possibility of exploiting that. I don't know if I would have arrived at knight g5, but in any event, bishop b2 is still a good move. So knight e5, and I take knight e5 and then f4. And this was the idea. Knight has to go back, and basically every move from here on out until I actually play it, the engine is just screaming for knight b5, which just makes complete sense. Black really needs to trade, and then once I recapture, now black lost a defender of the e5 square. I maintained mine, and I'm going to be able to get e5 in. Whenever that happens, there will be a lot of pressure on d6, and if takes takes, well, then I can add the open f file to my list of advantages, which already includes the queen side and center. I eventually get there, but played it a little more slowly. I brought the rook over, and I was debating between rook d1 and e1. Settled on e1. Again, trying to get in e5. Black plays e6, and black needed to do something, because if I'm given lots of time, then I already have the plan in place. And so black needed to do something. Engine thinks this is inaccurate, but kind of hard to suggest something. We see the bishop d4 check in the game, and that was nothing to be concerned about. So black undermines with e6. I played bishop g4. I'm trying to give the bishop a job. I was wanting black to take on d5, which is what happens. And on various depths, the engine thinks that c takes d5 is the best move. I rejected that because I didn't want to allow his light squared bishop to have a role, and I didn't want to play knight takes d5 because, again, I didn't want him to be able to trade off this light squared bishop. And so I went with e takes d5. Engine is not a fan, but this is by far the most logical move to my dumb little human brain. Black plays f5, which does stop my f-pawn, but my bishop is actually doing a good job now on f3. It controls the pretty important e4 and g4 squares. They become more important once black gets in knight f6. So my bishop is doing a job. The e6 square is pretty weak. That matters because there's a pawn on d6, so if I can invade with a rook, then that will be pretty unpleasant. So I've got the e file. I am going to be able to trade off the dark squared bishops, and then black's king is going to look a little weak, so I'm really liking my position here. Black finally tosses in this bishop d4 check idea, and I move. Queen h4 looks active, but threatens and achieves nothing. Just g3, kicking the queen out. Well, the queen actually comes in, but again, this looks scary, but doesn't actually do anything. And now this bishop d4, it actually just runs into knight b5, so now I'm attacking the bishop twice. Black trades and I recapture. And now this queen is on a very dangerous diagonal. Black's dark squares are very weak. Knight's attacking d6. This is just a great position. Rook f6 to defend the pawn. I play bishop g2. Careful not to blunder mate here. If you bring the rook in too early, then you just get mated. So bishop g2, kicking the queen out, and now the rook can enter. And here there are already some cool tactical ideas. If the rook defends the knight, well, we just take anyway. And after the recapture, we see how dangerous that queen was on the long diagonal. If rook f7, we can just take that, and when the king recaptures, we fork. And it's almost a shame to have to win this bishop, because it's more amusing to just keep it there on b7 doing nothing, but I would have taken that free piece. So instead of doing those things, Black played g5, which is kind of a desperate, never really going to work attempt to get counterplay. But again, this bishop is a nice defender. I've got a decent pawn shelter. Rook's here, queen defends laterally, and black has only got 2 pieces in an attack. This can't really ever work, so I just take that knight. Bishop c8, hitting the rook. I just bring it back over to its dominant square, controlling the only open file. I thought about rook d8 here, but rook e7 is actually a little bit stronger according to the engine. So takes. Now the file is open, and here I just bring the queen over to e2. And the idea is to lend a little bit more support to the king side, double up on the e file, so now the rook can enter with check after the bishop moves. And I was also thinking about potentially invading on e6 if the bishop ever moves. So we get bishop a6 attacking the knight, and now I thought about forking, but it's just not necessary, and actually the engine likes this move better. So rook e8 check, rook takes, queen takes check, king g7, and now I really like this little queen e7 check. This is another idea of bringing the queen in, is that the queen is actually very annoying here. So now there are no rook h6 ideas because the rook is pinned to the queen, and so black played king h6. Now I take on d6 with the knight, and again, there are already cool ideas here. So like knight takes f5, rook can't recapture because that would hang the queen. But after knight takes f5, that's forking the king and queen. So black's in a lot of trouble there, and it's already mate in 8 actually. Black speeds it up, king h5. I took on h7 with check, rook blocks. And here the first tactic I saw was actually queen takes rook, king takes rook, knight takes f5, king back, knight takes queen, king recaptures up a rook. But then I remembered the old advice, if you've got time to look, whenever you find a good move, look for better. And so I was like, oh yeah, how about we just deliver checkmate? That would be better. So, pretty decent first round game. We will get to the abominations that are rounds 2 and 3 eventually. So takeaways for this game: just played principled chess, controlled the center, was a little bit patient with rook b1, and had a plan, stuck to it. And as we'll see from the next couple of games, when one side plays principled chess and the other side doesn't, this is what can happen. Hope you got something out of it. Keep grinding those tactics and check out rounds 2 and 3 for some of the worst chess that a human being has ever played. Thanks for watching.